We were led by a cold-blooded killer named Tennessee Vic. And together, we cut a path of blood and destruction across the territory.
Dead Man's Hand is a first-person shooter game set in the Wild West. It runs on the Unreal 2 engine and was developed by a team called Human Head Studios. Known for the third-person hack-and-slash Rune, and many years later when they went on to create the FPS game, Prey. Dead Man's Hand tells the downright cliched Western story of an outlaw betrayed by his own, who sets off on a quest for vengeance, gunning down everyone who gets in his way. The protagonist in this instance is a gunfighter named Tejon, who is shot by a group known as the Nine and left to rot in a prison cell. The game opens with Tejon escaping from his cell and beginning a long journey to hunt down all 8 of his former comrades, and, well, you know the rest. There's maybe 24 levels in total, and they each range from about 10 to 15 minutes in length. These include everything you'd expect in a Western game, from saloons with honky-tonk pianos and women of ill repute, to dangerous mine shafts with dynamite stacks and a roller coaster cart ride. There's a wide variety between environments, though the core gameplay remains the same for each area. Some of the better levels are those where you're on horseback, moving through a town or alongside a steam train as you shoot at enemies as they methodically stick their heads up. It all feels like one of those Western-themed shooting galleries you see at an arcade, which kind of ties in with the gameplay itself. The game works off a score system of sorts, and headshots, shooting enemies in mid-air, or explosive kills will help to garner the most points. Earning points also fills up your special meter, which uses a weapon skill dependent on which weapon is actually equipped, from fanning with the revolver to using a sniper scope on a rifle. As you progress through the levels, you also unlock new weapons which are selected from a loadout before the mission begins. It's a shame that there's only really 9 weapons to choose from in total, and even less if you consider the fact that the shotguns are completely useless. I found myself choosing the repeating weapons most of the time as they have a pretty decent firing rate and damage output. Each level also begins with a poker minigame where you can play a series of hands to earn extra ammo to assist you in the level. This minigame is pretty easy to pick up and addictive as hell. The odds are swung heavily in the player's direction, which is a good thing. I've had more 4-of-a-kinds and full houses playing this minigame than I have in 6 years of playing free-roll poker in real life. Of course, if you get greedy, you're liable to lose it all. As much as it pains me to say this though, Dead Man's Hand has a lot of problems, and it's a damn shame. The single biggest issue with this game is that it just doesn't feature quick saves or checkpoints of any kind. You're literally expected to finish entire levels in a single run, and that just flat out sucks no matter how you look at it. Some of the levels go for a good 10 or 15 minutes and even end in boss fights on occasion. To have to play these entire areas over and over is just bad design. I know it kind of keeps in with the arcade style they were going for, but it's going to turn off a lot of players. The enemies are all hit-scan bullet sponges that shrug off headshots like it's nothing, and it's quite common for enemies to somehow get real close and blast you in your asshole before you even know what's going on. Numerous times I've also had them shoot me through walls, and that shit ain't cool. But the game's biggest problem is that a lot of the time it just feels like wasted potential. The gunfights are sporadic and extremely brief and just never seem to take off. You mostly take on 1 or 2 enemies at a time with these 5 to 10 second lulls in between. You'll often see explosive barrels or a lone Gatling gun for instance, but there's no one around to use them on, and they just look kinda lonely sitting there. And it really sucks because during those moments when you've got a half a dozen guys shooting at you and all these destructive elements in the environment at your disposal, you really see the game at its high point and wonder why it always wasn't like this. I guess Dead Man's Hand is kind of worth playing. I mean, Western games aren't a common occurrence in the FPS genre, so it's almost worth checking out for that alone. I'm also a huge fan of the game's soundtrack and sound design in general, with a great spaghetti western-esque score and lots of impactful gunshot and explosive effects. But it really does have a lot of problems that kind of directly affect the overall enjoyment. Something I recently played that takes this gameplay idea and does it very well is Call of Juarez Gunslinger. If you're after an arcade-styled Western shooter, then I think that's a safer bet, and it's also a lot easier to obtain as well. Dead Man's Hand wasn't the last game Human Head Studios developed. As I said earlier, they also went on to develop the FPS game Prey, which I see as one of the last great FPS games ever made. and it's also going to be the next game I review, so until then, stay tuned.